Next up off the top is this. Now, Netflix has, they started the whole notion years ago about we're not just going to be a curator of other people's content. We're going to start producing our content. Their chief executive officer said famously one time, we got to become HBO before HBO becomes us. And sure enough, they did. And they created for a couple of years this creative utopia where anybody could come to them with an idea and they would fund the idea. South Park once did this infamously amazing joke where the kids once phoned Netflix trying to see if they could get their own superhero series. And the person at Netflix answered the phone by saying, thank you for calling Netflix, you're greenlit. And that's been kind of the motif, if you will, about Netflix, that everything and anything gets made. Money is unlimited, despite the fact that they're billions in debt, all that kind of stuff. Well, the party's over. To a degree. Netflix is obviously going to continue making big stuff, but apparently, according to their bosses, they're about to slash their production budgets. Not necessarily meaning they're going to reduce the budget of existing shows, but rather they're not just going to throw around money at all types of projects now anymore. They're going to tighten the purse strings. This comes to us from Engadget, who was writing about this whole thing, and they said this. Netflix content chief Ted Sarandos told several of his high-ranking TV and film executives in early June that the company had to be more picky with its spending on big-budget productions. Any upcoming projects needs to bring in large numbers of viewers and will no longer be able to float by due to being loved by critics or earning company more credibility. One example Sarandos gave is a no-go for the future was Triple Frontier, an action drama starring Ben Affleck that cost $115 million and flopped. Now, I'm not really clear on what a flop means for Netflix, because it's not a box office thing. It's about, did it bring in any more viewers? And maybe it did, maybe it didn't, whatever. But apparently, they can't just be throwing around $100 million budgets on movies that are going to go straight to Netflix. At least not nearly as many. Rob, for a number of years now, it has kind of been everybody, the refrain from everybody has been, well, just take it to Netflix. If there's some movie idea, it doesn't matter if it's a $200 million project or the refrain has been taken to Netflix. And sure enough, anybody could take anything to Netflix and they were just eating it up regardless of what it was. Part of the reason why we've gotten so many crappy movies on Netflix, and they've had a couple of winners as well. You hear about this. Number one, do you think this is a smart move on their part? Are you surprised that they're doing this at all? What do you think about it?
I'm thinking $115 million for Triple Frontier? No wonder someone's upset.
Would you see the cast?
Well, it's still,
Yeah.
I mean, a movie like 115, that's more than Terminator 2 cost. Of course, that was in the early 90s.
That was, a different age.
But I think that, look, their income is based on subscribers. That's how they get their money. And their subscriber base it's going to top out at some point. They can't just ultimately, like Facebook, end up with 1 billion people paying $10 a month, where they're taking in that kind of cash. And I've always said that I've thought, this is only me speaking, that Netflix is kind of a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. You know, they want to keep paying stuff out, but every time they borrow, hey, we're borrowing another $3 billion. Well, if their income is only based on subscriptions, eventually you can't keep borrowing money because you're not getting more money coming in. You're getting the same amount of money, but you're borrowing more? How's that going to work ultimately? And when they're spending things like $115 million on Triple Frontier, clearly somebody's not watching those budgets close enough, because that movie should not have cost $115 million.
And beyond that, like they've been in this mode where they've wanted to spend the money of feature films without spending any marketing. Because we've complained a lot about on the show about things just suddenly appear on Netflix and go that there's no way you would know. Mm-hmm. There's no way you'd know. Now, Triple Frontier is one of the projects that they did put a little bit of marketing behind, so credit to them for that. But for every one Triple Frontier, there's a dozen other things. I had somebody writing to the show the other day that Shaft, which did not get a theatrical release in a bunch of other countries, popped up on Netflix. And there were people writing me saying, John, I just turned on Netflix one day and was swooping around. Oh, there's Shaft? What? The new Shaft? Nobody had any clue. So they want to spend the money on the production of these things. They don't want to spend the money on the marketing of them, and you can't do one without the other. Because if they went into this with the philosophy of, we'll just put it on our network and everybody will find it, and we don't need to spend the money. So I don't know which way it goes. Anyway, Aaron, for a long time, Netflix was kind of seen by the creative community as this utopia. Just great. There's somebody there who will take our projects no matter what.
I have a friend that pitched a show to them yesterday.
Really?
The second meeting, yeah.
And hey, I pitched a show to them before, so I don't want to sound like I'm slamming on them, but what do you make of all this when you hear about this?
Well, what I'm curious about is when you bring up the Last Frontier, is this more about a slashing their feature budgets or also their original programming when it comes to their series?
It sounds like across the board.
Because what makes me sad is, yeah, obviously, and I agree with Robert on that, like 115 million, are you kidding me? But there's also some really incredible shows that have come out from that in the beginning maybe didn't necessarily have the star power. Black Mirror, for example. I feel like Black Mirror is a slow burn, a show that people find. It didn't like come out the gate hot and heavy, but people have continued to find it. And I would hate to see incredible, shows that are really unique and are stories that aren't being told other places. I would hate to see those types of shows not get the opportunity to be seen or launched on the network, a network that does like to have to take risks simply because they don't immediately have that star power, which I think is then going into network territory. Oh, if it doesn't work in the first gate, we're just going to cancel it or not give it a chance at all.
Right. To me, it sounds a little bit more like they're just going to make those decisions before they spend the money on it. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. So it doesn't sound like things like Stranger Things or a Black Mirror, but I just don't think we're moving out of the age where they're just going to put everything out there. And by the way, I still believe this. I still believe by this time in 2020, I believe before we get to Comic-Con next year, Netflix will switch to a week-by-week release schedule for episodes. Because right now, this is another problem that they have. They drop an entire season of something, people will talk about it for a couple of days, but then there's nothing new. And whereas you take shows like some of my favorite shows of all time are ones I got caught up on as they came, like week after week. I kept hearing people talk about this Sons of Anarchy show week after week. So finally jumped in. Week after week, I heard people talking about this Lucifer show. So I jumped on board, and that builds momentum and everything. That's something that Netflix doesn't have. Now, don't get me wrong. I love them dropping an entire season at once because I'm a binger. But at the same time, it might be smarter from that way. So I think it's going to affect their features, their ongoing series, all that kind of stuff. I don't think we're going to notice it too much as from a viewer point of view at first. But it sounds like a move they had to make. And you know what? I think this is probably a smart move on their part too. But what do you guys think about that? Are you surprised to hear about Netflix saying that just the throwing out, Jack Nicholson as the Joker throwing bags of money in the crowds in Gotham, that those days seem to be over? What do you think about that? Jump into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys.